enhance the rate of your hair growth. Those things are designed to be done in conjunction with some other treatments that have been shown in many, many clinical studies to increase the rate and duration of hair growth. So now you have in mind a picture of what's happening at the level of individual hairs. And if you're anything like me, you're probably thinking, wow, there's a lot going on down there, just below the surface of the skin. And indeed there is. But really the things to think about are that stem cell population that actually give rise to the hair proteins, so that actually create the hair, the melanocytes that darken that hair, that give it pigment, that sebaceous gland and the oil sebum that provides some important antimicrobial and other properties to that general region, and that erector pili muscle. That erector pili muscle, as I mentioned earlier, is important for creating goosebumps, and it's important for keeping huskies how hairs actually grow and why they grow the way they do. This is extremely important toward understanding hair replacement and slowing hair loss. There are 3 basic phases of growth of a hair. The first phase is the phase in which the stem cells down in that bulb give rise to the cells that make up the proteins of the hair. So the actual growth of the hair. And keep in mind that the hair is actually growing from the bottom. Now you might think, of course it's growing from the bottom. Everyone knows that. But a lot of people think that the hair starts growing right at the surface of the skin. That's not the way it works. The hair is actually growing from deep within the root and stacking up and then eventually extends out across the top of the skin. That growth phase is called the anagen phase. ANAGEN. And this, for some people, will ring a bell because if you've ever been interested in weightlifting, or even if you're an endurance runner, you'll hear about things that are anabolic, that promote growth, so ana, of growth, or catabolic, that promote breakdown. So the first phase of hair growth is called the anagen phase, and it's a period of varying duration depending on which hair in the body we're talking about. So the anagen, or the growth phase for hairs on the head, as I mentioned earlier, is anywhere from 2 to 8 years. For most people, it's going to be about 6 years. What this means is that if we were to just not cut our hair, just let our hair grow for 2 to 8 years, say, oh, my hair grows really, really fast. Other people will say, oh, my hair grows really, really slowly. That is probably not the case. While there could be slight differences in the rate of growth, that is the addition of more keratin to the actual hairs, so creation of more hair more quickly, almost certainly what's happening is that the duration of the anagen phase in some people is just much longer than it is in other people. And we don't realize this, and we tend to think more in terms of how fast hair grows, because if you were to just look at somebody's hair, you'd say, oh, they're all more or less the same length. I mean, some people's bangs are shorter than the back because they cut them, but if they were to just grow their hair, you'd say, oh, it's all more or less the same length. But if we were to zoom in with a microscope, we would see that there are a lot of hairs down there in between the other hairs that are very, very short, or even tiny, tiny, tiny. And those are coming in as the other ones are finishing their anagen phase. Okay? So that's the anagen, or growth phase. After the anagen phase comes the catagen phase. Again, this resembles the word catabolic, or the breakdown phase. During the catagen phase, the hair is actually receding not from the top down to the skin surface and then into the root, but the other way. It's actually receding from that bulb region up toward the surface. And that catagen phase is going to also be of different duration depending on which area of the body you're in, and it will vary a little bit depending on who you are, meaning from person to person. We'll talk about the influences on the anagen and catagen phase in a moment. Why is it important that it actually recedes from the inside out?